midnight tide. The first time I saw Blackwater Beach, it looked like the kind of place where nothing bad had ever happened. The ocean stretched endlessly beneath a pale blue sky, gentle waves rolled onto the soft white sand, and old weathered beach houses stood quietly along the dunes as if they had been watching over the shoreline for generations. That illusion lasted exactly 3 days. My name is Ethan Carter, and I was 22 years old when everything happened. I had just finished my 3rd year of college and landed a remote internship with a software company. Since all my work could be done online, my parents suggested I spend the summer at my grandfather's old beach house in a sleepy coastal town called Blackwater Cove. Most tourists never stopped there. They preferred larger beaches with amusement parks, crowded boardwalks, loud music, and expensive restaurants. Blackwater Cove was different. It was peaceful, almost too peaceful. By 9 every evening, the streets emptied. By 10, the only sounds came from the ocean and the distant cries of seagulls. People who lived there seemed to disappear indoors the moment darkness arrived. At first, I thought it was simply because everyone was old. Later, I realized they knew something I didn't. Every morning I woke before sunrise, answered emails, attended online meetings, and finished my work before mid-afternoon. The rest of my day belonged to me. Sometimes I explored abandoned fishing docks. Sometimes I walked miles along empty beaches. Sometimes I simply sat on the porch, listening to waves crash against the shore. Life felt simple again. The ocean became my escape. I've been swimming since I was 6 years old. Competitions, state championships, years of training. Water always felt safer than land. Whenever life became stressful, swimming cleared my mind. That's why I started taking night swims. The water stayed surprisingly warm after long summer days. Without crowds or noisy families, it felt like I had the entire Atlantic Ocean to myself. The first few nights were perfect. Moonlight reflected across the water like silver glass. Gentle waves lifted me effortlessly. Stars covered the sky from horizon to horizon. It felt magical. Then I met Mrs. Holloway. She lived 3 houses away. She looked nearly 80 but walked without a cane. Every evening she watered the same flowers while staring toward the ocean. One afternoon she noticed the towel hanging over my shoulder. "Swimming again?" she asked. "Always." She smiled. "During the day?" "Usually at night." The smile disappeared. "You shouldn't do that," I laughed. "I'm a strong swimmer." "You shouldn't do that," I laughed. "I'm a strong swimmer." "I'm not worried about the water." Her eyes stayed fixed on the horizon. "I'm worried about what calls from it." I chuckled politely, assuming she was joking. She didn't laugh. Instead, she quietly walked back inside and shut the door. That conversation lingered in my thoughts longer than I expected. Over the following week, I noticed strange things. No one walked on the beach after sunset. Fishing boats returned before dark. Even teenagers avoided the shoreline at night. One evening I asked a cashier at the local grocery store why. He hesitated. "You'll hear stories if you stay long enough." "What kind of stories?" He shrugged. "The sea keeps what belongs to it." Before I could ask more, another customer interrupted us. I forgot about it, or at least, I tried to. Friday arrived with heavy humidity. The air felt thick. Storm clouds gathered offshore but never reached land. By 10:30 that night, I couldn't sleep. The house felt unbearably warm. So I grabbed my towel and flashlight and walked toward the beach. The streets were completely empty. No cars, no voices, not even dogs barking. Only the rhythmic sound of waves. The moon hid behind drifting clouds. Everything looked darker than usual. When I reached the sand, I noticed something strange. My footprints were the only ones. Not a single other track crossed the beach. I placed my backpack beneath an overturned lifeguard chair and walked into the water. The ocean felt perfect, cool, calm, comforting. I swam farther than usual until the shore looked small behind me. Floating on my back, I watched clouds drift across the stars. Minutes passed, maybe 20, maybe 30. Time didn't seem important anymore. Then, Someone whispered my name. Ethan. My eyes snapped open. There was nobody nearby, only endless black water. I rolled over and scanned the surface. Nothing. I laughed nervously, probably my imagination. I floated again. Ethan. This time it came from farther out. A woman's voice, soft, almost pleading. Every muscle in my body tightened. I lifted my head above the water. Hello? Silence. The ocean answered only with gentle waves. I waited. Nothing. Just as I convinced myself I had imagined everything. A scream shattered the night. Please help me! It echoed across the water. The sound came from somewhere deep in the darkness beyond me. Then another scream, closer, desperate, terrified. Without thinking, I started swimming toward it. Chapter 2. The Green Light. Ethan cut through the dark water as fast as he could. Every stroke echoed in his ears. The woman's terrified cries continued somewhere ahead. Help me! Her voice sounded painfully close, yet no matter how hard he swam, he couldn't see anyone. The ocean stretched endlessly beneath the moonlight. There wasn't a single boat, not a single floating object, nothing. Ethan. His heart nearly stopped. This time the voice wasn't screaming, it whispered his name. He froze. He hadn't told anyone he was coming to the beach. No one should have known he was there. A cold breeze swept across the water. The warm ocean suddenly felt icy. Goosebumps covered his arms. He slowly turned toward the shoreline. The beach looked impossibly far away. The houses were tiny lights in the distance. A wave of panic hit him. How had he swum this far without noticing? Then he heard splashing, heavy splashing. Something was moving beneath the surface, not ahead of him, behind him. Ethan spun around. Nothing, only gentle waves. Then, a faint green glow appeared beneath the water. At first it looked like glowing seaweed, but it was moving. The light circled him once, then disappeared. His breathing became shallow. He remembered Mrs. Holloway's warning. I'm worried about what calls from the water. The woman's screams suddenly stopped. Complete silence. Not even the waves seemed to move. The silence felt unnatural, like the entire ocean was holding its breath. Then, a splash exploded only a few feet away. Ethan jerked backward. A pale hand burst from the water. It reached toward him and vanished beneath the surface before he could react. He gasped. There was no face, no body, only a hand. His survival instincts finally took over. He turned and swam toward shore with everything he had. The current fought him. Every wave seemed to push him backward. His arms burned. His lungs screamed for air. The green light appeared again beneath him. This time there were 2 lights, then 4, then dozens. They moved together beneath the surface like something enormous was circling below. Ethan refused to look down again. He kept swimming. Minutes felt like hours. Finally, his feet touched sand. He stumbled through the shallow water and collapsed on the beach. For several minutes, he couldn't move. When he finally looked back, the ocean was perfectly calm. No green lights, no screams, nothing. The next morning, Ethan convinced himself it had all been exhaustion until he looked at his ankle. A thin green ring circled it completely. It looked like someone had wrapped glowing paint around his skin. It didn't hurt. It wouldn't wash off. He scrubbed until his skin turned red. The mark remained. That afternoon, he drove into town for groceries. Mrs. Holloway was outside again. The moment she saw his ankle, the color drained from her face. You heard it, she whispered. Ethan stared. Heard what? The caller. What are you talking about? She looked around nervously before stepping closer. People who follow the voice don't always come back. Ethan laughed uneasily. Someone was probably drowning. Mrs. Holloway slowly shook her head. They always think that. What do you mean, always? She sighed. My brother disappeared 40 years ago. She pointed toward the sea. He heard a little girl crying. Ethan remained silent. He swam out to save her. She swallowed hard. We never found his body. A chill ran down Ethan's spine. You're saying the same thing happened before? It has happened for generations. She reached into her pocket and handed him an old photograph. It showed 6 young fishermen standing beside a wooden boat. One of them had a green ring around his ankle, exactly like Ethan's. He looked up. Who is he? My brother. The photograph slipped slightly in Ethan's trembling hands. I don't understand. Neither did he. She took the picture back, but after he heard the voice, she looked toward the waves. He kept returning to the beach every night. Ethan felt sick. He disappeared a week later. That evening, Ethan locked every door and every window. He wasn't going anywhere near the beach. Rain began falling after midnight. Wind rattled the old house. Around 1 a.m, knock, knock, knock. Someone was at the front door. Ethan checked the security camera. No one. Another knock. This time, from the back door. He hurried through the house. Again, nobody. Then he heard it. Tap, tap, tap. Against the living room window. He slowly pulled back the curtain. Outside stood a woman wearing a soaked white dress. Her long black hair covered her face. She wasn't moving. She simply stood there in the rain. Ethan reached for his phone. When he looked back, she was gone. Seconds later, a whisper drifted through the darkness. Ethan. He closed every curtain in the house. The whisper continued. Not outside anymore. Inside. Somewhere upstairs. And then...
Chapter 3. What lived beneath the tide. Ethan stood frozen in the living room. The footsteps above him were slow, deliberate, as though someone was walking across the attic floor. Step, step, step. Every sound echoed through the old beach house. His breathing became shallow. He knew he was alone. He had checked every room before going to bed. The attic had been locked for years, yet someone or something was moving up there. The whisper returned. Ethan. It sounded exactly like the woman's voice from the ocean. Then came a loud bang. The attic door slammed open. Dust drifted down from the ceiling. Silence followed. For nearly a minute, Ethan couldn't move. Finally, he grabbed the heavy flashlight from the kitchen drawer and slowly climbed the narrow staircase. The attic door hung open. Cold air poured from the darkness. He pointed the flashlight inside. Old furniture, broken picture frames, fishing nets covered in dust. Nothing else. He stepped inside. The beam swept across the room. Then it stopped. Someone had written words across the wooden floor. The letters looked wet, green, as though they had been painted with glowing seawater. Don't follow the voice. Before Ethan could react, the writing slowly faded until the floor looked normal again. His heart pounded. The flashlight flickered. The temperature dropped. Behind him, something breathed. He spun around. Nobody. Then every window in the house shattered at once. Glass exploded across the floor. A powerful gust of icy air rushed inside. The whisper became a scream. Come back. The voice no longer sounded human. It echoed from every direction. Ethan ran. He raced downstairs, burst through the front door, and sprinted toward his truck. The engine wouldn't start. Again, nothing. The headlights suddenly turned on by themselves. For one brief second, they illuminated the beach. A woman stood near the shoreline. She wore the same white dress. Long black hair covered her face. One pale arm slowly lifted, pointing toward the ocean. Then she vanished. The next morning, Ethan drove straight to Mrs. Holloway's house. She listened without interrupting. When he finished, she quietly opened an old wooden chest. Inside were faded journals, newspaper clippings, and black and white photographs. One article caught Ethan's attention. 5 fishermen missing during summer storm, 1963. None of the bodies had ever been recovered. Another newspaper told a different story. Teenager disappears after midnight swim. Then another, and another. Every 10 or 15 years, someone vanished near Blackwater Beach. Always at night. Always after hearing someone calling for help. Mrs. Holloway handed Ethan an old leather journal. It belonged to the lighthouse keeper. The final page read, "The thing beneath the sea. It steals voices. It calls with the voices of the dead. If you answer, it marks you. If you return, it takes you forever." Ethan looked down at the green ring around his ankle. It had become darker. That evening, he packed his belongings. He wanted nothing more than to leave Blackwater Cove forever. But as he loaded the final box into his truck, his phone rang. Unknown number. He answered. "Ethan." It was his mother's voice. She sounded terrified. "Please help me." His blood froze. His mother was hundreds of miles away. The call ended. Seconds later, his phone rang again. This time, his best friend. "Ethan, help." Then another. His father, his sister, Peter. Every call lasted only a few seconds before ending. Each one begged for help. Each voice sounded perfectly real. Then he remembered the journal. It steals voices. He threw the phone into the truck and drove away. As the town disappeared behind him, the green mark around his ankle slowly faded. By sunrise, it was completely gone. 2 years passed. Ethan never returned. He never spoke about Blackwater Cove. Most people wouldn't have believed him anyway. One rainy evening, he received a package with no return address. Inside was an old photograph. It showed Blackwater Beach. In the center stood a man facing the ocean. He wore the same clothes Ethan had worn that night. Someone had written a message across the back. "It remembers everyone who hears its call." Ethan stared at the picture for several minutes. Then he noticed something that made his blood run cold. There was another figure standing in the water behind him. Only its head was visible above the waves. Its skin was pale green. Its eyes glowed faintly in the darkness. And although the photograph had been taken from behind, the creature was smiling directly at the camera. Burned the photograph. The next morning, the picture was back on his kitchen table, perfectly untouched. Sometimes, when storms roll in from the sea, Ethan still hears a distant woman crying for help outside his window. He never looks, because deep down, he knows the voice isn't asking to be rescued. It's searching for someone foolish enough to answer.